I'm a cognitive neuroscientist, which basically is neuroscience and psychology mixed together. And I bring people into my lab, and I try to understand the brain mechanisms that give rise to how people think, how they feel, how they interact with each other, and how they make decisions. People tend to be optimistic about themselves, their families, their kids, but not so optimistic about where the world is going or where their leaders are taking them. And one reason for that is a sense of control. So we have a sense that we're in control over our own life. We have a sense that we can steer the wheel in the right direction, and that's why we're optimistic about our own future. But we don't have a sense that we're in control of the world and where the country is going and where the leaders are taking us. And so we're less optimistic about that. We call it private optimism, but public despair. If you take small businesses, for example, in the US, out of every 3 small businesses, only 1 will remain standing in 5 years. So that's 33%. But when you ask small business owners about their own likelihood of success, 81% say it is them that will remain standing. And that means that half of them, 50%, are going to be unpleasantly surprised when they fail. And so all of these are examples of what we call the optimism bias, which is a human tendency to expect the future to be better than the present or the past, and our tendency, on average, to overestimate the likelihood of positive events happening and underestimate the likelihood of negative events happening to us. There's also the negative aspects that I should talk about as well, which is if we underestimate our risk, we might not take precautionary action, right? If I think everything's going to be fine, I might not wear a helmet when I bike, I might not buy insurance, I might not go to medical screenings. But I think that over the course of evolution, the positive aspects of this bias probably outweighed the negative, which is why humans have evolved to have this optimism bias. If you think about it, our ancestors, to go out of the cave and go hunting, they had to believe they probably are likely to come back. To leave Africa and explore the rest of the world, they have to have a sense that there's something out there for them to find, something that's better than what they already have. And for all of these reasons, we probably have evolved this bias. But it's not that we think that things will just magically turn out okay, but rather that we have the unique ability to make it so. Now, statistically, we can't all be better than everyone else, but if we think we're probably a little bit more interesting, more attractive, that means we're more likely to get that promotion, more likely to remain married. But still, the question remains, how do we maintain this optimism in the face of reality? Because we go through life experiencing not only positive events, but also negative events, right? We experience heartache, we experience failure, we read the newspapers, we know what's going out there, and still we remain calmly optimistic about our own future. So as a neuroscientist, I found this question extremely puzzling because according to all the theories out there, if you have an expectation and the expectation is not met, you should revise it, and that should lead to realism and certainly not to optimism. So after studying this question for many, many years, the very scientific answer is this. So when someone threatens us or something threatens us, our immediate reaction is to protect ourselves. And one way to protect ourselves is to distance ourselves from the threat, right? If someone says, well, your project's not going to work out or the numbers are not adding up, we instantly try to rationalize away the threat or avoid it altogether. And because it's difficult to change our own biases, we need to use another strategy, which is putting in policies in place, right? Identifying what we're doing that's leading us to negative outcomes, and then putting in policies to try to change that, rather than trying to change our biases directly. And the second thing that we could do is, if we know that 80% of the brains around us have this optimism bias, that really means that we need to change the way that we communicate information and advice to others. Again, the British government is using this principle to get people to pay more taxes on time. So usually, they send a letter to people who didn't pay taxes on time, telling them how important it is to pay taxes, and that didn't work very well. So then they added one sentence, and that sentence said, 9 out of 10 people in Britain pay their taxes on time. and that one sentence enhanced compliance rate by 15% and is thought to bring to the government £5.6 billion. So a simple way of changing behavior is highlighting the positive actions of others, which is cost-effective as well. The third is progress monitoring. So I already told you that the brain does a really good job at processing information about how things can get better and not so much about how things can get worse. And what that means is that instead of telling someone, for example, a teenage kid, don't smoke because it will get you cancer, you might say, if you stop smoking, you're more likely to get into the basketball team. So framing our message and how things can get better, not how they can get worse. So instead of saying, if you take route A, you'll lose time and money, we can say, if you take route B, you will gain time and money. So instead of highlighting the decline, highlighting the progress instead. The main thing our brain is trying to do, it's trying to control its environment in order to gain reward and avoid loss. The brain is not there for thinking. Thinking is order to control our environment to survive. And so anytime that people have a sense that they have control, anytime that they have a sense they have a choice, they are more motivated to act and they're happier with the choices. We know, for example, if you give people a choice, let's say you have two projects, one in London and one in New York, and you have to choose which one you want to work on. And they're both really great, and you don't know what to do, but you have to make a choice, so you say, okay, I choose New York. What happens is that we find seconds after making that choice, people reevaluate the options, and they say the option that they chose is much better than they thought a few seconds ago, and the option that they decided not to take is worse than they thought a few seconds ago. So they would say, well, good thing I didn't choose London, it's so gray and rainy there, and good thing I chose New York, I'm gonna see lots of theater. And it doesn't work if someone else is making the choice for you. It only works if you make your own choice. But you can direct people in making their choices, right? Give them a sense that they have control, that they have a choice. Now, we know that 2, 3, 4 options is a good way to go. However, give people too many choices and they end up not choosing anything. There's a famous study where people were given choices between 60 different jams in a supermarket, even to take for free. And they were so complex that they ended up leaving the store empty-handed. So too many choices is not good, but some choice is really important for motivation and being more committed to the action that we're taking. So our happiness today is very much related in what we expect will happen in the future. And let me give you a few studies that show you that. In one study conducted at Harvard, people were asked a week before vacation to say how happy they were, a week during vacation how happy they were, and a week after vacation how happy they were. Do you know when people were the happiest? The day before vacation, right? The day before the vacation, they were in their office. They were not on the, didn't get on the plane yet, but yet that was the day that they were the happiest. Why? Because that was the day that in their mind, they were already on vacation. And in their mind, the vacation was amazing. When they went on vacation, it was quite good, but not as good as it was in their mind the day before. So people are not necessarily aware, but becoming aware means that we can use this awareness to our advantage, right? So by knowing this, we can be more effective in communication. If you know that 80% of the people around you have the bias, that means we need to change the way we communicate information and advice to others. Restore motivation when needed in different ways, not just material ways. And protect from the negative consequences by figuring out what the negative outcomes are and then putting policy in place to change it, not necessarily changing the biases.